The Unexpected Guardian. Edward Hawthorne's voice tore through the silence like a blade. "What the hell do you think you're doing in my bed?" He filled the doorway of the master bedroom, his tall figure tense with fury, shock etched across his features. Rainwater dripped from his coat, unnoticed, his attention fixed entirely on Maya Williams, the woman in his bed. Maya bolted upright, pulse racing, eyes wide with surprise rather than guilt. The twin boys, Ethan and Eli, lay curled beside her, finally asleep, their faces peaceful, breathing steady. Ethan's teddy bear rose and fell with each breath. "I can explain," Maya whispered, trying not to disturb the children. Her hands lifted slightly in a calming gesture. They were frightened. Eli started crying. Ethan had a nosebleed. "I stay, daints, eatings, a." Edward cut her off. His hand moved swiftly, the sharp crack of the slap echoing through the room as it connected with her cheek. Maya stumbled backward, gasping, one hand flying to her face. She remained silent, her eyes locking onto his, more stunned by the violence than the anger behind it. "I don't care what excuse you have," Edward snarled. "You're fired. Get out of my house now." She stood motionless, hand pressed to her cheek, steadying her breathing. When her voice came, it was barely above a whisper. "They begged me not to leave them. I stayed because they were finally calm. Finally safe. I said get out." Maya glanced down at the boys, still sleeping deeply, peacefully, as though the darkness that haunted them had finally lifted. She leaned over carefully, kissed Eli's head, then Ethan's. Without words or ceremony, she stepped away from the bed, shoes in hand, and walked past Edward in silence. He didn't stop her. He didn't apologize. Downstairs, Mrs. Keller turned as Maya descended. The red mark on her cheek told the story. The older woman's eyes widened in shock. Maya said nothing. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. Maya stepped into the gray afternoon, pulled her coat tighter, and began walking toward the gate. Back upstairs, Edward stood in the master bedroom, still breathing hard. He looked at the bed again, jaw clenched, then something registered. The quiet. He moved closer. Ethan's brow was smooth. No tossing, no whispering, no cold sweat. Eli's thumb rested in his mouth, but his other hand lay relaxed on the blanket. They were asleep. Not drugged. Not exhausted from crying. Just asleep. His throat tightened. 14 nannies, therapists, doctors. Hours of screaming, fits, and anxiety. Yet, Maya, this soft-spoken stranger, had accomplished what none of them could, and he'd struck her. He sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. Shame seeped into his chest like ink spreading. On the nightstand, a folded note caught his eye. He opened it. "If you can't stay for them, at least don't push away the ones who will." It wasn't signed. He read it twice, then again. His reflection in the nearby mirror stared back at him. A man hardened by grief, drowning in control, suffocating in silence. Down the hall, Mrs. Keller stood watching. "Sir," she said softly, "she didn't touch a thing in here. Only brought them in when the little one had a nosebleed." He didn't respond. "She stayed because they asked. That's all. They didn't ask for me. They didn't ask for anyone else. Just her." Edward looked up slowly, eyes dark with something beyond anger now, something closer to regret. Outside, the gate creaked closed, and for the first time in months, the Hawthorne house fell silent, not with grief or rage, but with something else. Peace. The kind Maya had left behind. The house felt too quiet. Not the comforting kind, like fresh snowfall or pages turning in an old book. This was the wrong kind, hollow and incomplete, like an unanswered question. Edward Hawthorne sat alone in his study, glass of scotch untouched beside him. Maya's note rested on the desk like a verdict. "If you can't stay for them, at least don't push away the ones who will." He'd read it 7 times. Outside, dusk settled over the estate like a heavy blanket, the wind pressing softly against the windows. Inside, the twins still slept, unaware of the storm they'd just weathered, unaware that the one person they'd allowed into their fragile world was gone. Edward leaned back in his leather chair and rubbed his temples. His hand stung faintly, the ghost of the slap he'd delivered still marked on his skin. He hadn't planned it. It wasn't who he believed himself to be, yet it had happened. A moment of misguided fury born from grief and countless quiet failures. He had struck a woman. And not just any woman. He stood abruptly and headed upstairs. The hallway outside the boys' bedroom smelled faintly of lavender and warm cotton. A small wooden stool sat against the wall. Maya's sketchbook rested on top, closed neatly as if left there intentionally. He picked it up. Inside were simple drawings, rough, untrained, but full of heart. 2 boys holding hands beneath a tree, a tall house with too many windows. A figure sitting between the boys, arms stretched like wings with a caption beneath, "The one who stays." He exhaled slowly. In the nursery, Eli stirred. Edward peeked inside. The boy rolled over but didn't wake. No nightmares, no tears. He closed the door softly. Downstairs, Mrs. Keller was folding napkins when Edward entered the kitchen. She looked up and froze. Something in his expression told her to set the linen aside. "She's gone," he said simply. "I know," she replied. "I made a mistake," he said almost to himself. Mrs. Keller raised her eyebrows, but her voice remained neutral. "You don't say. She was in my bed." "She was in your room," Keller corrected. "Because the boys wouldn't sleep anywhere else. You weren't here." "I was." I heard them cry, beg for her. She calmed them. He pressed his lips together. I know what you thought," she said gently. "But you weren't thinking." Silence stretched between them. He looked at the chair where Maya had sat during lunch only yesterday. It felt like weeks ago. "I need to find her," he said. Mrs. Keller didn't argue. "Start with the return address on her letter, Georgia." He nodded, already heading toward the hall. Across town, Maya sat alone on a bench outside the train station. Her cheeks still throbbed beneath the cold. She hadn't cried. Not when he yelled, not when he hit her, not even when she walked past the front gates with nothing but her bag and the ache of unfinished work in her chest. But now, with her coat wrapped tight and her fingers curled around a lukewarm cup of vending machine coffee, tears finally welled. She wiped them quickly, not from shame, but because crying in public was a habit she'd spent years unlearning. A woman nearby watched her for a moment, then offered a tissue without a word. Maya smiled in thanks and looked up at the night sky. It was funny in a cruel way. She had survived worse than a slap. She'd endured being abandoned by a foster family at age 11, losing her own son to illness, being told repeatedly that she was too soft to handle difficult cases. But that house, those boys, they had touched something inside her she hadn't accessed in years. The train pulled in with a long sigh of brakes and metal. She stood slowly, uncertain whether she'd board. Her ticket was in her coat pocket. Warning: destination, Savannah. But her heart remained upstairs in a white house in Greenwich, where 2 boys were finally learning to sleep. She sat back down. The next morning, Edward stood in his son's room with a breakfast tray, scrambled eggs, toast with strawberry jam, a small bowl of cut fruit. He hadn't done this before, not once since their mother died. Eli sat up, groggy. "Where's Miss Maya?" Edward hesitated. Ethan sat up too. "Is she gone?" Edward nodded. "She had to leave." "Why?" Eli's voice cracked. "She didn't do anything bad," Ethan said, eyes narrowing. "She helped us. You saw we were good." Edward knelt beside the bed, placing the tray on the nightstand. "It wasn't your fault. It was mine." Eli looked at him hard. Did you yell at her? Edward didn't lie. Yes. Did you hit her? Ethan's voice was low. Edward's throat tightened. He nodded once. Both boys turned away. He stayed there, kneeling on the carpet for a long time. I'll fix it, he said finally. I'll bring her back. They didn't respond, but they heard him. Later that day, Maya boarded a local bus, not a train, and headed to the nearby shelter where she used to volunteer. She needed space, perspective, somewhere to remember that the world was bigger than one house, even one that held her heart. She taught a writing class that afternoon to a group of teenage girls, many of them runaways. She told them stories, not about Edward or his children, but about choosing to stay when others walk away, about knowing your worth even when others don't. When she left the shelter, there was a note stuck in the spokes of her bike. It wasn't from Edward, but it said, "They asked for you." Both of them. Maya looked up at the sky, now streaked with orange, and this time she smiled. Edward Hawthorne didn't knock. He stepped into the old community center just as the sun began its descent behind the trees, casting long golden shadows across the gymnasium floor. The sound of his polished shoes on linoleum felt out of place, like a cello in a punk rock band. But he didn't flinch. He scanned the room, spotting Maya at the far end, crouched beside a whiteboard, erasing crooked letters from a lesson. Around her, teenage girls gathered in a loose circle, laughing, joking, their notebooks sprawled on the floor. Maya laughed with them, her voice lighter than he remembered, not free of pain, but unburdened for a moment. He didn't realize how tightly he'd been holding his breath until she looked up and saw him. The laughter died, not because anyone commanded it, but because something in Maya's posture shifted, like a curtain drawn mid-performance. She stood. He walked forward, hands empty. No briefcase, no prepared apology, just the weight of what he had. "I need to talk to you," he said. The girls looked at him warily, one of them stepping slightly in front of Maya. "It's okay," Maya said gently, and the girl relaxed. Edward glanced at the whiteboard. A single sentence had been written across the top. "Your voice has value, even when it shakes." He turned to Maya. "May I?" She nodded, leading him outside to the bench by the bus stop, the same one she'd sat on the day before, coffee in hand, tears hidden in the corners of her eyes. "I was wrong," he said immediately. "I judged you. I reacted without listening, and I put my hands on you. That's something I will regret for the rest of my life." Maya said nothing. "I saw you in my space, in my bed," he continued, "and I let fear speak louder than truth. That wasn't just unfair, it was cruel." "You didn't believe me," she said. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. "Even after your sons trusted me." "I know," he said. She looked away. "You don't get to walk back into my life because you finally realized I was telling the truth." "I'm not here to clear my name," he said. "I'm here because they asked for you, not a nanny. You." Maya's eyes softened. "How are they?" "Quiet," he admitted. "Too quiet." She nodded slowly. That's not peace. That's a wound closing over without healing." He looked down, hands clasped between his knees. "I want to fix this." "You can't fix it," she said. "But you can start by acknowledging that what your sons need isn't control, it's connection." He exhaled. "Come back." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she asked, "If I say yes, will I still be staff?" He hesitated. You'll have whatever title you want. Advisor, mentor, partner." She raised an eyebrow. "Partner in their care," he clarified, though the word lingered heavier than he intended. Maya considered it. "Fine," she said, "but I have conditions." "Of course." "First, no cameras in the children's rooms." He blinked. "There are none." "There were," she said. "Last month one nanny told me." He frowned. "They were meant for safety." They teach the kids that privacy isn't theirs to keep. He nodded once. Second, she continued, they eat dinner at the table, with you. No phones, no business. He hesitated, but nodded again. Third, she said, we rewrite the house rules together. With them. He stared at her. They're 5. They're people, she replied. He cracked the smallest smile. Anything else? She took a deep breath. Yes, the next time you raise your hand to someone who doesn't deserve it, anyone, I'm gone, and I won't come back. His expression fell. Understood? She stood. I'll see them in the morning. He stood too. Do you want to ride? She shook her head. I'll take the bus. I still have to finish up here. He nodded. Maya, thank you. She paused. Don't thank me yet. We're starting over, Mr. Hawthorne. And this time I'm not walking on eggshells. She turned and walked back into the building, the whiteboard waiting for her return. Edward stood at the curb, watching her go. That night, he cleared the dinner table himself. He called his sons downstairs. He sat between them with a bowl of spaghetti and awkwardly tried to tell a bedtime story, getting the names wrong, the voices too stiff. They laughed at him, not unkindly, just honestly. And upstairs, in their freshly made beds, Ethan whispered to Eli, "She's coming back." "How do you know?" Eli asked. "Because she said goodbye," Ethan replied, pulling the blanket over his head. "Nobody else ever does." The story continues with Maya's return, the rebuilding of trust, the custody hearing, the foundation's creation, and the ongoing journey of healing for all involved, maintaining all the original plot points and emotional beats while rephrased throughout.